Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A concise reply to Christianity. If my intention was to announce my conversion to Christianity, no Christian would complain that my speech is too blunt. So if I must reject an aspect of Christianity in a brief form, let me not also be accused of bluntness. A Muslim believes in the religion of Jesus, but sees mainline Christianity as a religion constructed about Jesus. Our protest is against two particular excesses: the apotheosis of Jesus, that is, the deification of a man, and the most frequent missionary tactics which are directed toward Muslims. To deal with the first item, and much later on the second, Christians and Muslims who learn something of one another's religion find that a crucial issue is the nature of Jesus. The majority of Christians make Jesus divine, while Muslims say that he was no more than a prophet of God, a faultless human being. The doctrine of the Trinity avows that three distinct co-equals are God. In particular, Jesus is said to be God the Son, or the Son of God, and equal to God. As the Muslim questions details of this arrangement, the Christian usually forms a common explanation for our differences. He complains that Muslims do not really understand the Trinity, that all our complaints are actually accusing Christians of tritheism and other heresies, things that Christians don't really believe. So the Muslim seeks clarification of the teaching, and as it is explained to him, he asks at every step, how could that be so? For example, we insist that the term Son of God cannot have a literal interpretation. Sonship and divine nature would be necessary attributes of such an individual, but these are incompatible. The first, sonship, describes someone who has received life, while the second, divine nature, describes someone who received his life from no one. These are mutually exclusive requirements. To be a son is to be less than divine, and to be divine is to be no one's son. As the discussion proceeds, it is the Christian who will eventually take refuge in the response, these are things that we cannot understand. That is, his assessment of the Muslim's problem becomes something he admits to himself. He started by saying, Muslims don't understand the Trinity, and finishes by saying, nobody can. So he changes his tactics. Now he complains that Muslims refuse to accept what cannot be understood. But the modified approach is a diversion. Now the concepts of verification and understanding are confused. To illustrate, chemical reactions may be verified, but the atom is not understood. I can verify that hydrogen and oxygen combine to make water. That doesn't mean I understand the atom. This distinction between verifying and understanding is the key to our concise reply. It is the Muslim who must redirect the discussion. Our primary issue is more basic than resolving the difficulties of Trinitarian doctrine. Rather than ask how the Trinity can be so, we should ask why it must be so. We ask, why must Jesus be divine? A few centuries ago, European philosophers used to feel that a conjecture was proven if it could be shown that the conjecture was similar to something already stated by Aristotle. Unfortunately, that approach stopped short of challenging Aristotle and discovering truth. In the same way, If we rest the Trinitarian case on what people have said about Jesus, we stop short of establishing the truth of the matter. And our purpose here is no more than the illustration that belief in the Trinity can only be based on church authority. Many Christians admit that this is the case, but there are others who insist that the teaching was explained by Jesus himself. Let them produce their proof is the repeated phrase in the Quran. That is, provide the documentation that Jesus himself claimed unqualified deity. Unless this evidence can be produced, authorities are subject to challenge, and then the Christian may not evade the Muslim's questions concerning understanding. The Christian will have no justification for maintaining an illogical position, unless he is content to rely on the opinions of men. Now, for Christians, the only documents accepted as reporting the words of Jesus are the accounts given in the Bible. Now, we leave the Muslim attitude toward the Bible for later in this talk. Right now, our motivation comes from the Quranic verse which says, "Say, O people of the book, you have no ground to stand upon unless you stand fast by the law, the gospel, and all the revelation that has come to you from your Lord." In this place, Christians are advised to support their claims by citing their books. Thus, Muslims believe that no saying of Jesus can be produced which shows him grasping at equality with God. The primary issue is not whether Jesus is God. The most important question is whether he said that he was equal to God. The Bible record of sayings credited to Jesus is quite small. After allowing for duplication in the 4 gospel accounts, these sayings could be printed in 2 columns of a newspaper, and none of this handful of texts is an explicit claim of deity. All quotations are implicit. That is, they require interpretation. An explicit statement is a statement like the sign on a store window that says closed. An implicit statement is a statement where the meaning is hidden beneath the words. It requires some interpretation. These are the statements that are quoted by Jesus. In other words, we are told what Jesus said and then told what he meant. And so our method takes an obvious form. It is not our intention or our obligation to reinterpret the Bible. We are satisfied to merely verify that Christian interpretations are insufficient, ambiguous, or impossible. That is, we mean to argue 3 things. That in some places where the meaning of a quotation is clear, it is still insufficient to prove that Jesus claimed equality with God. Or that in other places, quotations cited are open to different interpretations. They are ambiguous. Or, still other quotations of Jesus have been given interpretations which are impossible. In these 3 cases, it means the evidence is either inadequate, inconclusive, or unacceptable. Let's begin with insufficient evidence. The virgin birth of Jesus and the miracles he demonstrated are cited by some as proof of his divinity. The insufficiency of the premises is obvious. We need only read the biblical account of Adam's creation without father or mother, and the accounts of miracles associated with the prophet Elisha. In the case of these 2 men, no Christian asserts their divinity, yet each has a qualification in common with Jesus. Some maintain that Jesus was God because the Hebrew Scriptures predicted his coming. The inadequacy here is only slightly less apparent, because the ancient Hebrew Scriptures are also cited as predicting the role of John the Baptist. These 3 arguments are mentioned to show that the ready claims of Christians betray a selective or forgetful recall of Scripture. They know the fact of virgin birth as well as they know the account of Adam's origins. Yet they interpret the first and overlook the second. Now, to pursue our case,